Billy Strings is one of the finest guitar players in the world today. How do I know that? Because he sat back there the other day and blew my mind playing some of the most amazing guitar stuff I've heard in a long time. If you do know Billy, then you know this already. Here's my interview. Billy, welcome.
Thank you.
Good to have you here.
Man, so good to be here.
I always wondered, I've been listening to you for years, and I know that your dad was, he taught you how to play the guitar, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do you start doing it? Like, what did you learn at first? What did he teach you?
I mean, it started before I remember, really. Like in my high chair and stuff, I had this little plastic toy guitar. It was about this big, and it was the 90s, you know, it had neon colored buttons.
Right.
And where the sound hole is here was a speaker, but it had these plastic ridges in the same direction as strings, you know. My dad gave me a pick, and I used to just scratch on that while he would jam, and I would, you know, and he'd be like, look at his right hand, you know, and he's gonna be a picker, you know. And he would always be having these jams. We lived in a trailer park in Portland, Michigan, and my dad and his friend Gerald, they'd have a few beers and pick in the kitchen, and I'd be sitting there trying to jam along. From there, you know, when I was about like 4 years old or something, we were walking through this antique store in my hometown. I just saw this guitar, and it was just like, I need it, you know, and I kicked and screamed and threw a little fit on the floor, and this old lady that ran the place was like, well, how much do you got? You know, and my dad only had like 30 bucks or something, and she's like, I'll take 30 for it or whatever. So he bought me my first guitar. It was one of those house brand, it wasn't a Stella or a Silvertone or anything like that. The name on it was Norma.
Okay.
But it had this big metal bridge that came up to about here, and then, you know, and the painted on wood grain, you know, grill marks.
It's awesome.
I would later smash that guitar in a drunken, just, you know, it's like my first guitar I ever had, and it was a victim of just the crazy times. But yeah, on that guitar, I probably learned G, C, and D.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember specifically, like, watching my dad's hands and just looking, you know. And he would play, and my dad would hold his pick like this, you know, his 3 fingers kind of chilling down to the side right here. And I would look at my hand and then look at his and just try to make it the same, you know. Like, how does Dad do this? And just by looking, you know.
Yeah.
Just really paying attention, trying to make my hand look like his, you know. And so, yeah, he taught me G, C, and D, and probably A, you know, E, maybe. Started to learn some chords, and then he could teach me fiddle tunes like Beaumont Rag, Salt Creek, and stuff like that. And I was his little rhythm player, you know, from the time I, you know, started learning those chords, probably 5 years old or something, and by the time I was 6 or 7, I could hang on a couple tunes, you know?
Right.
Kind of an interesting thing that I guess would happen is a tune like Beaumont Rag. I mean, that one was really informative for me in that when I was learning it, I kept messing it up, right?
Okay.
And I'd get to the B part and I'd screw it up every time. And finally, I just said, right in the middle of the song, I was just like, stop, just stop. And I go, why don't you just play it and let me listen? And so the song was, you know, Beaumont Rag. Mm-hmm. It's like this. You know.
You're talking about like all that cross picking there, right, with the open strings? Is that the thing that was difficult?
No, just what I was doing.
Yeah.
So my dad would be capoed up in D like this,
Yeah.
on the 2nd fret, playing in a C position in D. But he would leave me down here like this, which is a really great way to open up the sound of the guitars.
Yeah.
This is what I played. And so how I was learning that at first was I was counting, okay, D, 2, 3, 4, A, 2, 3, 4, B, and then G, and then I was trying to count and stuff, you know? Mm-hmm. and I couldn't count. You know? So I said, stop and just let me listen. And so I listened to what he was doing, you know.
Right.
He was going, and I started listening for those things. The melodies were cues.
Right.
You know, what he was doing was the cue. And I started, instead of going, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, I started going da 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 da. And then this. I know when my dad goes, that's my turn to go. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So after that, I listened to him play it through. And I go, okay. And the next time through, I nailed it. You know, he just started laughing, and he reached over and squeezed my little hand, you know, still holding my pick, and kind of tough,
awesome.
You know. He gave me my hand a little squeeze, and even called my grandma on the phone. It was like, listen to this kid, you know. And we played it for grandma over the phone. And so he was like proud of me, you know. And that was a big moment for me, as far as this is it. You know, this is my whole identity, is I'm a picker.
You were hooked.
Yeah. My dad was like my hero, you know. He wore Levi's, I wore Levi's. He wore a ball cap, I wore a ball cap. I wanted to be just like him. And he would, like I said, he'd have a couple people over and be playing songs, and everybody's standing around. Everybody's smiling and laughing and having a good time and loving these songs. And I saw that from even a young age, how much joy he was bringing to people. And he was like, man, everybody loves my dad, you know?
That's awesome.
Because he's just a jolly guy sitting there playing songs, and who doesn't love that, you know?
Right.
Who doesn't want to hang with that guy? And then they took me to a Bluegrass festival. I must have been about 4 years old. Charlotte Bluegrass Festival up in Michigan. Ralph Stanley was there, Jim and Jesse, a bunch of them. I think maybe Larry Sparks might have been on that bill.
Now, did your dad know any of them or not?
Mm-mm.
Okay.
They were gods to us.
Yeah, they were
They were Mount Rush. I mean,
yeah.
these guys are stars
Yeah.
to us. But yeah, I remember going to that Bluegrass Festival, and so I had heard Doc Watson's music, Bill Monroe's music, Flatt and Scruggs, Ralph and Carter, and the Osborne Brothers, and Larry Sparks, Jimmy Martin, stuff like that. Around my house on records, I heard my dad playing those songs. I played those songs, you know, just all the classic bluegrass songs. But when I went to that Bluegrass Festival, I heard it live.
Yeah.
And I seen those guys in their suits with their hats, gold-plated old Gibson Mastertone banjos, stepping up to a mic. It was gangster, dude. Like, they walked through the crowd like, you know what I mean? They were tall, and they carried these banjo cases, and they just looked so good. And then they get up on stage, and I'm hearing twin fiddle, you know, or banjo, like I said, stepping up into a 57, coming through a PA, 3-part harmonies, ripping, you know, and it's just like, I was floored.
Right.
I mean, it was like the moment when I was a little kid when I saw the fire truck or the policeman or the whatever. It was like, I want to be a policeman, or I want to be like, no, I want to fucking do that. Like, look at, it was just, they were so cool to me, you know what I mean? And I remember probably shortly after that, I was in kindergarten, and I made this little, we were making a book, like, you know, this is my friend, and I weigh 43 pounds this year, and whatever, and when I grow up, I want to be and it was a blank line, and I drew a picture of a guy with a banjo, you know. It's like, I want to be a bluegrass player when I grow up. It's always been the shit to me, man.
So did you just play guitar all the time when you were a kid then? You were just obsessed immediately?
Pretty much. You know, there was a lot of picking, like I said, around my house. There was this campground that was owned by a dear friend of ours. His name was Brad Lasko, and he was a banjo player. He was my dad's, like, best friend.
Okay.
So a lot of times it was me and my dad and Brad. Sometimes there'd be a bass player or somebody else that would come join, but the three of us was the main. We could sit there and play all night, you know, and him and Brad would sing songs. I didn't sing a lot. Like I said, I played rhythm for the first several years until I was a teenager, really.
Right.
Which was really formative for me, and I got to listen a bunch.
Yeah.
I got to listen to those melodies, and I got to listen to the vocal harmonies, because I was just playing rhythm, but what I'm really doing is listening to just like on Beaumont Rag,
Yeah.
So when I was little, I used to think I was like magic or something. I could just tell what chord was coming next. I didn't know there was the use of, you know, seventh chords and stuff like that.
Yeah.
You know, I wouldn't know the song, and I'd just be like, oh, I think there's a C chord coming up next, and I'd hit it, and wow, how did I know that, you know? And I used to think I was the shit or something, you know, but yeah, my dad would do something like that, and my ear would lead me to the next chord.
Yeah.
And I was like, how did I know, you know? So yeah, I learned just by ear and by picking and just hearing the songs, and bluegrass harmony, you know, like vocal harmony, was a thing that kind of seeped into my heart and soul early on. Hearing my dad and Brad sing those songs, and I noticed how my dad would stay here sometimes and Brad would be up. Sometimes they'd both go up. Sometimes only one person would move.
They wouldn't do straight thirds. They'd sometimes have fourths and things like that where they follow the chords.
Yeah,
like
I mean,
that.
just the lonesome sound of bluegrass,
Yeah.
you know, like the harmonies, you know. And so that kind of seeped into my ears where I can hear somebody sing like a lead vocal and I just hear the tenor part and the baritone. Baritone's a little harder to find sometimes. And sometimes if the chords are moving around a lot, it's a little harder. But for the most part, it's like I can just hear the harmony, you know, and I have been able to since I was a little kid, kind of just knowing where, okay, well, if you're singing here and I'm on tenor, this is my part.
I'd like to take a second to talk to you about this channel. Of the people that regularly watch my channel, 58% are actually not subscribed. So I encourage you to hit the subscribe button now. This will help me to get even more of my dream guests and continue to grow my channel. Thank you. Being from Michigan, people are like, well, it's Michigan, bluegrass in Michigan?
It spreads, for one thing. It's a bug and it can bite you. And then you go give it to someone else. And also, you know, a place like Michigan, there was a lot of folks that moved up there from Kentucky and Tennessee and stuff to go work, you know, back in the day at them factories and stuff.
Yeah.
And then they stayed there and they had, their families was there and they brought their songs with them. You know, so yeah, I mean, there's a lot of bluegrass in the Rust Belt.
When you're talking about being 5 years old, you're born in 92, so you're talking about late 90s or so, basically,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, I think 97 or something would have been around the time of that Bluegrass Festival.
So when you're telling me this, in my mind, I'm thinking like this is the 1970s, because I'm looking at it from my perspective. I was in 67, I was 5 years old.
It may
you know?
as well have been being raised by my parents.
Right.
You know what I mean? And truly, it was like, you know, my dad drove a 72 old truck, you know, a C10,
Yeah.
you know, and we were always listening. I was raised on a lot of older music, you know. Besides Doc Watson and stuff like that, you know, it was Hendrix and the Beatles and, you know, Black Sabbath, and Johnny Winter was a big one around my house. That's one of our dudes. You know?
And how would you get informed by that music? Did you have did your dad have a record collection? Or
Yeah.
your mom or something?
Yeah, my dad's records. I remember like specifically times where he sat me down. He would call me from across the house. Boomer, get in here, you know. I'm thinking, oh shit, you know, what did I do? And then I go in his room and he's like, sit down. Okay, shuts the door. Oh, fuck. I'm about to get a whipping. This is David Grisman. You need to know this.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And he puts on Doc and Dog, or he did the same thing. I was 7 years old when he showed me Black Sabbath. The first record, the first song, on his big stereo system, fucking cranked. And, you know, it starts with the storm and the bells and...
Oh, yeah.
You know? What is this that stands before me? And, God, scared the living shit out of me, man. It traumatized me. I mean, that music, because I could see Satan, you know, when I heard that shit in my little imaginative mind.
Right.
But he was also like, you know, he was like, check it out, man. Like, you gotta listen, like, you know, the riffs and shit. He was trying to show me. But he showed me King Crimson. He would show me, like, he would just be in his room, like, oh, listening to some shit, geeking out, and just want to share it with somebody. And I was his dude that he did that with, man. And I, you know, he would sit me down and specifically show me things. David Grisman and Doc Watson made a record sometime in the 90s. He had this one on CD. Most of the stuff was vinyl, but this one was a CD, and he was showing me that because he had just got a mandolin. His sister Julie Bell bought him a mandolin, a little Kentucky mandolin for his birthday. So he was out playing mandolin, and you know, he's probably getting into David Grisman a bunch. And he sat me down and was like, "This is David Grisman, you know." So that record was huge for me, Doc and Dog. David Grisman's always been a huge idol, and you know, in our house, he's just our hero, you know. And anyone who plays with Doc Watson must be good, you know. I've since become good friends with Dog, and I've been able to introduce people like him and Del McCoury and stuff to my father, you know, his heroes, so cool. You know, and be like, "Dad, this is Dog," you know. I remember when you introduced me to his music. Well, here, I'm going to introduce you to him.
To him, that's amazing.
You know, and then we sit there and pick all night, you know, or whatever. Like, I remember there was a time where we played with Del and Dog were doing some gigs, and we played down there, and my mom and Aunt Roxanne and my dad came, and you know, for one thing, it was like I get to show my dad, get to introduce him to his heroes, but on the other hand, I get to show Del and Dog how cool my fucking dad is.
Right.
You know, and he was like, it was just cool as hell, you know, to hear my dad just singing old songs with Del McCoury and with David Grisman on mandolin, just sitting there in the green room picking. It's like, that was just like, this is the full circle,
That's amazing.
Man. And I just feel really blessed to have been exposed to so much good music growing up. I mean, it was a thing. It was like, for one thing, I never thought I'd make a living doing it. But it was like oxygen in my house. It was like we played it on our instruments. We listened to music all the time. My mom would smoke a little joint and clean the house and listen to Pearl Jam, you know, and whatever. Like, you know, she always used to leave a little half a roach sitting there. We'd steal them. But it was just always seeing my parents' love for music.
When your dad would say that, oh, we're going to have a little jam, would you get psyched if people were coming over? Or would they just show up and then you would just grab your guitar and sit down and play?
Yeah, it was just kind of like...
People stop by?
Yeah, if someone swings by, next thing you know, Dad gets his guitar out, and next thing you know, Brad comes over with his banjo, and a few more people swing by, next thing you know, we're on the back porch picking, you know, and once the moon comes out, you know, it all starts happening. And there was always two, like at first we would be all, you know, all picking these, we want to pick, you know, and sing some fast bluegrass and shit. But later on, after everybody had quite a few beers and stuff, you know, next thing you know, we're all playing. You know, we'd get all lonesome with it and start playing the slow numbers. Old Mac Wiseman tunes start to show up and stuff. Man, I was just lucky to be around a cool-ass dad that knew a lot of good music. He's a great player and great singer.
You guys made a record together?
We did, yeah. We made a record.
Was that something that you were like, I gotta make a record with my dad, and then just had to make time for it?
God, it was kind of eating at me almost. Because I was on the road. I've been on the road since I was like 18, 19, you know?
Yeah.
And I just have been on the road, you know, and the years go by and holy shit, all these gigs keep happening and I just am rolling, you know? And yeah, I got to a point where it was like, I need to stop at least long enough to make a record with my dad, you know, before I lose the chance, you know, or something. And he ain't getting any younger, you know? So yeah, it was a big bucket list kind of thing for me to do that, get in the studio with them and all that.
Could you ever have imagined that you guys would record together?
I always dreamed of it, for sure. But I never imagined any of this stuff, you know? It seemed so impossible where I was from. We always played music, but even like when I was going to school and stuff, none of the adults around me presented my guitar playing as an option as a career path.
Right.
I was sitting there playing the banjo at lunch break in school, And the principal of the school was like, what are you gonna do when you grow up, you know? Have you ever thought about becoming a journalist or something? While I'm playing the banjo, and I'm like, I'm gonna try to play music, you know, but apparently you don't think I'm capable or like that's a good idea or something. So it never seemed like a good, feasible option. And I honestly thought I would become a drug addict or wither away or end up in prison or some shit like a lot of my buddies did, you know, or whatever happened, you know. But at some point when I moved out of like my hometown, I moved up to Traverse City, Michigan, and there was a different reception up there. There was an art gallery, and people were painting pictures and brewing craft beer, and there was restaurants, and there was, you know, people were into music and stuff. And I went out to a couple open mic nights, you know, and started going. And I got a standing ovation. And I'm like, what, these people never heard of Doc Watson before?
Right.
And they're just like, wow. And I was just like, whoa, maybe I should do this. So I was working at a hotel at the time, the Grand Traverse Resort, and I was not a good employee.
What were you doing there? What was your job?
Washing windows, taking out the trash, vacuuming shit, cleaning up people's puke, you know. And at first I started cleaning rooms, and then I switched over to where I got a walkie-talkie and I could basically walk around the hotel all day pretending to do stuff.
Right.
And that's what I did.
That's a perfect job.
Yeah.
Perfect musician job.
It was
right
great.
there.
I mean, and God bless my boss too. I think she was like a fan of my play, because I was playing gigs too.
Yeah.
And my boss had come out to see me play, and she was like a fan, and it felt like I couldn't get fired or something. I seen people get fired for way less than shit I was pulling.
What's interesting about playing bluegrass is that so much of it is knowing tunes, right? Everybody has this kind of group of tunes that people play, and you can really play by yourself. You do all the single note playing like that has groove to it, that, you know, the playing tunes like that. And unlike most guitar playing, it's very self-sufficient. You don't need anyone. You're playing there, and I'm like, yeah. Even without singing, then you put singing on top of it, and then you can accompany yourself and play. I mean, you're making it happen with single notes. How do you develop that? How did you develop that?
Man, I think, honestly, Doc Watson is a huge influence for me. And I feel like a lot of his stuff, which is really an interesting kind of way of playing, is he plays a lot of leads that exist right inside of the chords. Like maybe Way Downtown or something like a... I'm really just playing, but I'm playing melodies within there, you know?
But your right hand is so accurate.
I mean,
It's really super loose. There's no bum notes in there. I mean, you're super accurate when you're playing.
They're just going by fast. There's a bunch of bum notes in there.
No way, man. No way.
You know, bluegrass guys work on their timing.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of like a lot of bluegrass pickers really pride them. I mean, timing is essential. That's why we work on timing. That's why we play with a metronome and why we play with other people and why we play along with tracks and stuff, so we can groove with the track and, you know, ride on the train, not try to push it or pull it, you know, like, I mean, you can push it and pull it, but that's a different thing. You know, I'm sort of like an old bluegrass hole about folks that play live with like a click in their ears or something, and I'm thinking, well, isn't that why
talk about that.
Like, isn't that why we practice in the practice room, you know, like to work on our timing?
Yeah.
You know, someone that's got good timing, that's a good player, you know?
And there's a collective time feel of an ensemble. And that's an incredibly important thing, that if you play to clicks, you don't get that.
If you listen to, like, I mean, some of the most driving stuff, like early Lester Flatt and Earl Scruggs and stuff. I mean, that banjo comes in, that tempo goes up a little bit.
Yeah.
And then Lester starts singing and it kind of softens back down. And by the time Earl comes back around for that banjo again, it goes back up and it breathes.
What are some of the other records that you, as you got to be a teenager and stuff, that you kind of owned yourself that was your music? Were there rock records or anything that were going on at the time?
So my mom had this big CD book. It was about that thick. And one year for Christmas, I got a little CD player.
Yeah.
And I used to walk to school. I stole 2 CDs out of that big old booklet. And that's all I listened to for, I mean, that whole school year, it seemed like, was only Dark Side of the Moon and this Johnny Winter, like, greatest hits with Be Careful with the Fool and Dallas and all these great tunes on there. That was enough.
Yeah.
I sat there and digested that stuff for, the year. I was just a little kid in elementary school, but just freaking rocking out to Time and, Dark Side of the Moon, Another CD that I listened to a lot when I was younger was Yield, Pearl Jam.
Oh, yeah.
Such a great record.
That's a great record.
I love that record,
Yeah.
man. In my dad's vinyl collection, I guess besides all the Bluegrass and stuff, yeah, the White Album. My dad had a lot of Hendrix, Axis and Electric Ladyland, and he had like Crash Landing and a couple of these like other different ones. Also, the VHS tapes we had were pretty clutch, like.
Would you have like live concert VHS?
My dad would tape like Austin City Limits and
Yeah.
shit.
Yeah.
So it'd be some like movie, some Sylvester Stallone flick or something, but really it's like Ralph Stanley on Austin City Limits.
He'd record over the Sylvester Stallone,
Or
right?
whatever, yeah. And so we had those, there was Larry Sparks tapes, Ralph Stanley tapes, whatever, like stuff that was on TNN back then. And Doc Watson we had a couple tapes of. And we also had a Bill Monroe documentary, which was just so, like, I just remember being a little kid watching that stuff and hearing Bill Monroe talk. And there's this footage of Bill Monroe walking through like the, ruins of his old childhood home. And he's narrating in it and stuff. And it was so like, even as a kid, I realized the power in that footage and the nostalgia, like the soul in bluegrass, the lonesome part of it.
I'm trying to think. There was really a bluegrass revival around the "Oh Brother, Where Art Thou" soundtrack that came out probably around 2000 or something. Mm-hmm. But bluegrass always kind of has a revival that kind of comes into popular culture, then fades back, and then comes back in, and then kind of fades back.
Yeah, it lies dormant every once in a while.
It doesn't go away. Metal is the same way, actually, because metal will become popular, then for a few years, then kind of recede, but it never goes away. There's always the underground scene and everything, and then...
Yeah, so what makes bluegrass unlike like ska or something? That just completely disappears?
Right.
Yeah, I don't know.
Maybe it takes longer for ska to come back.
Yeah, that's all it is. It's like a wider orbit.
Well, maybe it's because because of bluegrass festivals. Talk about bluegrass festivals for people that are like, what? I don't even know what that means. What is a bluegrass festival?
A bluegrass festival is a music festival, basically, that is in a field, and everybody brings their campers and tents and stuff, and we all go there and camp. And there's a stage, and there's bands that play on the stage, and they all play into the same microphones, usually with numbers on them. And there's a supper break and a raffle. Mm-hmm. And nobody actually goes to see the bands that are on stage. They're all just picking in the campground.
Right. But this is why ska doesn't come back, because more often, because there is no ska festivals that are happening like that.
Man, it's a great thing. I mean, like I said, that going to Charlotte Bluegrass Festival when I was a little kid changed my whole life.
Okay, so what kind of stuff do you work on? You play every day, right? All the time.
Yeah, I mean, as much as I can.
Do you work on stuff, though? I mean, is there anything that you actually practice? Do you have a warm-up that you like to do, or you just play?
Well, for a long time, I just played until just a couple years ago, really. And it got me to where I was. Like, I always learned by ear.
Yep.
I always just played. I'm always winging it. I'm always in some jam or something, and I didn't really learn the song, and I'm on stage with some, Ringo Starr or something, and I'm like, just winging it. I got to a point where I was kind of sick of that and sick of maybe hearing the same licks over and over and not really, I felt like I wasn't growing anymore. I got to a plateau and I was playing all the time. And so gigging almost drives me down into a rut.
Right.
Where I get back in the practice room and then there's like this great circle that happens. It's like I practice and I feel good about my playing and I go tour and I'm playing stuff and then I start to feel like shit and I'm like, oh, I need to practice, and then I go back to practice and then I go tour and then I feel like I suck and then I go back to practice. You know what I mean? And it's like this, you know. Yeah, a couple years ago I got real sick of myself, I guess, and was just like, ugh. You know.
If I play that lick again.
I just, and also it's not just licks, like I said. It's me being in a professional setting or something.
Yeah.
And somebody talking to me and me not understanding what they're saying. Because they're saying, yeah, this is just A flat, you know, sharp 5 over C, you know. And I'm going, do what? You know, and then they play the chord, and I'm like, oh,
okay.
Yeah. And then making that Bela Fleck record a couple years ago, I'm in the room with Chris Thiele and Edgar Meyer and Bela Fleck, and these guys are they're talking in math equations, you know?
Yeah.
And me and Sam Bush are sitting there going, you know, what? Like, you know, whatever. And it just, I really felt like an infant sitting in the middle of the room pretending to know what everybody was talking about.
Those guys are really unusually studied musicians. I mean, they're real. All three of them are just incredible.
Yeah, oh yeah. Well, my schedule gets in the way of my practice a lot, my actual gigs, which is a lot of people's like, well, you're out there doing it, man. Like, what do you know? And it's like, yeah, but I want to practice. I think even my teacher says that. It's like, man, so many people are in their room practicing right now and they wish they could be out playing gigs like you.
Right.
And I'm like, I wish I could be at home practicing, you know what I mean? Because I want to get better. And playing gigs, I feel like I said, performing is a different thing. I've been really trying to dive deep more lately into like the more Zen side of like trying to play and not play and think and not think and just watch my fingers do their thing and, you know, the effortless mastery kind of thing. It's a lot easier said than done. Man, the original thing you asked me before I started rambling on for 10 fucking minutes was, have you been working on anything? And yeah, I mean, my teacher shows me shit all the time. Like, for instance, like right now I'm working on everything from like, you know, this stuff, the Bach and stuff, you know. And then like some, you know, little jazz and stuff. And like I learned Donna Lee.
Yep. Charlie Parker. Yep.
You know, as coming from a bluegrass background, it's a lot of 4 chords and, you know, the truth. And those jazz cats like circle around the chords in a way. Like, you know how I learned like Beaumont Rag, like I was telling you earlier, by listening to the melody. Bluegrass is very melody driven, you know. You play. In fact, that's how I learned how to play bluegrass. Like when I first started playing like lead guitar, it was more like, you know, I was learning like Hendrix and stuff. I got an electric. But when I went back later on and tried to learn bluegrass, I couldn't figure out what the hell it was. And once again, it was the melody.
Right.
You know, because you don't just play, you know, over Salt Creek or something. You know, you don't just play. You play. And that's the tune. But these jazz things that I'm learning, like, they circle around the chords and the root note, you know, circle around the root. And after I learned Donna Lee, I came up with this little tune, like, well, between Donna Lee and learning just this little... use learn loosely.
All those 7th chord arpeggios.
Yeah, I just kind of learned that thing kind of up and down the neck. And then I came up with this tune called Escanaba. So that little part right there.
Yeah.
You know, it was because I had learned Donna Lee recently.
I heard the da-da-da-da-da-da-da.
Yeah, well, it's like, now we're changing.
Yep.
And I was like, well, I gotta play this run, but the chords are changing, so I gotta go. You know what I mean? And that was because I learned Donna Lee, that I was able to finish composing that little section. You know, just in the way that how the notes wrap around the root and stuff like that. You know, and the whole other part, the whole riff came from literally the practice that I was doing.
Yeah.
It comes out in the writing even quicker than in the improvising, I think. I think it takes a long time for something to show itself. One thing I was, you know, like all these big $10 chords, man, you know?
Yeah.
You know, I never played those chords, you know, ever. You know, I'm a bluegrass guy. But Tony Rice did.
He did.
And I fucking love it.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I want to learn that shit, you know?
Yeah.
It sounds so cool when he's like, you know. It's just like he knows all these great voicings. And there was, for instance, a tune, Bye Bye Blues. You know, the chords are like. And that's how I used to play it.
Yeah.
And probably still do. But one time I was jamming, just picking backstage, and I had been practicing these shell voicings, and I just was like. And I realized it's all right here.
Right.
If you want it to be.
Yeah.
And so that when I was just kind of, like I said, we were just jamming backstage or something. And I was like, whoa, it worked. And I'm like, you know, yeah, I don't know. I get sick of hearing myself, and you know, when everybody's being like, man, you're so good, it's like, fuck. Well, not really, you know?
Tell me about that guitar.
Yeah.
What year is that guitar?
1940, D28. Yeah. It's a great one. I've had it for, I don't know, a year or two, a couple years. It's just a hoss, man. Really comfortable neck and does that.
Okay, so
It's like a big block Chevy.
When he walked in and opened that guitar, I was like, that's the loudest guitar I've ever heard. I mean, that guitar is so loud. You can't tell unless you're sitting a couple feet away, but it's incredibly loud. I mean, it really projects.
Yeah, it's a good one,
It's
man.
in remarkably good shape, too, Billy.
I know, I kind of wish it was more like scratched up and shit.
You would never guess it's from 1940.
I got this 46 that just looks like it's been attacked by a bear.
Right.
And it just is, it's so cool looking. But this one, you know, yeah, it's a little bit more tame on the patina and on the scratches and stuff like that. But sound-wise, man, it's
amazing.
It's really got an incredible bass response.
It's really even.
Yeah, I love it. It does have that little B string thing.
Yeah.
It's like it'll be in tune, but then you play and it's not, and I'll just sit here and fiddle with it all the time. Or
Okay.
if I'm recording, you know, the engineer or something, check that B string.
Now, you like playing back here, picking back closer to the bridge, behind the sound hole a little bit.
Well, it depends, you know. I mean, there's times where I get right over here, over the sound hole. If I want some, you know, when I want that little edge, I'm kind of back here, kind of in this region.
Yep.
You know.
Where there's more resistance there.
Yeah, I mean, it just depends on if I really want to, you know, it just depends on what I'm doing. But yeah, there are definitely times where I'm.
That's a great demonstration of the different tonalities you can get just by where you pick.
Yeah, totally.
Okay, so Billy, when you're playing live, you have a different guitar that you play that's plugged in.
Yeah.
And you were showing it to me. Can we check it out for a minute or what?
Totally. Yeah, so this is the one I play into a mic in the studio. If we're on stage and we play into one large diaphragm condenser, which sometimes we do gather around the can, you know.
Yeah.
I'll grab this one.
Okay.
This one, as you mentioned, has volume. It's got huevos grandes.
Yes. Okay, so what is this guitar, Billy? This is your live guitar, right?
Yeah, this is a Preston Thompson DBA, which just means a Brazilian Adirondack dreadnought.
Yep.
And I got this one, I think, in 2018.
This one has seen better days, right?
Yeah, but it's also in its prime, you know. It's having a good time out there making music for all the peoples, and it's doing its dang job pretty good.
Okay, so what is this? I know that you have a microphone. We already talked about this before, but you have a mic inside that's back around this area, right?
So yeah, I kind of call this guitar the Frankenstein guitar because of all this, you know, bolts sticking out of its neck and shit. This is a Shure microphone. Do you remember what it is, Toby?
Beta 98 HC.
Yeah, it's a Shure Beta 98 HC microphone. And that actually goes to this little guy right here,
Okay.
which goes to my wireless pack, which is like, you know, duct tape to my damn strap. The wireless pack actually gives this phantom. So this microphone goes to my ears, and I can hear a real guitar with a microphone.
Okay.
Because I'm always just, you know, I live in a world where 1 second I'm playing an old Martin backstage, and then the next second I'm plugged in with an acoustic guitar, and I'm just going, it's just not the same, you know? It's
Right.
just plugged in acoustic guitar is just tough. It's just tough.
What's it sound like with your in-ears when you hear that microphone?
So yeah, I mean, it's a blend. I have the microphone, and then I have under the bridge here is 3 little transducer elements. It's a K&K Pure Mini, and that's just my main, you know, just bluegrass pick and tone.
Okay.
Clean right to the DI. That's just acoustic guitar sound, a transducer.
Yep.
The reason I have this here is because I can switch over to this single coil pickup, which then I turn a volume pedal on, and it sends my signal through a Kemper
Okay.
with the Soldano Super Lead thing on there.
SLO, yeah.
So I can switch over to this single coil and I can
With your 13s.
Yeah, you know. And I can, you know, do all that with like distortion and stuff. And,
Yeah.
And it sounds all, you know, like an electric guitar basically. So yeah, I can kind of, because we get into these big improv moments where it's just anything can happen at any time. It's like we're playing basketball. We're just paying attention and what the hell's going on. And sometimes it's just nice to turn on the electric guitar.
Now, I don't know if this is an optical illusion, but it seems like this neck is wider than your Martin neck a little bit, or not? Is it the exact same?
I think it's similar. This one is 1 11/16. It used to be bigger, actually. This is the second neck on this guitar.
Okay.
Yeah. Used to be.
What happened to the first one?
My hand got tired.
Okay.
And I just, because 1 3/4 is like it's a bluegrass thing. The pre-wars, they're 1 3/4. They're wider. And that's what all the bluegrass guys have to have. So that's what, of course, I ordered mine with.
Yeah.
Till I got to playing all these gigs on it. And I go, screw what the bluegrass people are doing, I want to get a smaller neck, And it's funny because like you play Tony Rice's guitar, that neck is pencil thin. It's like a popsicle stick, and skinny both ways, man. This neck is really comfortable. It feels wider than 1 11/16. I feel like there is some kind of illusion going on here, because I usually 1 11/16 feels a little bit more narrow to me.
Yeah.
But on this guitar, it's good. Preston Thompson actually, he's since passed on, and he's an awesome builder out of Sisters, Oregon, and they make amazing guitars, and they've been,
And how long have you had this? Since 2018 or something like that?
Yeah, and I've played pretty much every gig on it since then. It's been crushed by the airlines a couple times.
Man.
Yeah,
that must have been a serious...
that whole big section right there was all, right through a
even with a
hard
flight
case,
case, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing.
You got pinched in an elevator or something. But yeah, this guitar is the best plugged-in guitar that I've found,
And what is a DI that you use? What kind of DI do you use?
Well, my DI is actually like a Neve Shelford channel, I got that, going through there. I don't know if the microphone's on there yet, but definitely the pickups just go to this Neve thing. For a long time, I used a Grace Bix, actually, is the one that I use, the little one.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people use the Felix, and I actually just got one of those too for when I'm going to sit in or something. That way I can still have my mic and blend it, and because that's what all the bluegrass guys use, man, is the Felix, because you can do what I'm doing here. You can hand somebody one XLR and blend in some microphone with your banjo or whatever, so it's not just pickup tone out there.
Right.
So you can have a little clip-on mic, blend that in some, and hand someone one XLR. That's a really slick thing.
That's kind of an advance from back in the old days when you'd have to actually be planted in front of a mic live and stuff.
Yeah, and I wish I could play into a mic, there are times when I play for like a listening audience, It's really nice when that happens, when I just get to play the old Martin into a mic, no monitors, just it's the best. You can feel it coming through the house. I feel like I can play better because it's like the sound isn't right on my eardrum, and I'm not like, there's a weird thing that happens with in-ear monitors and playing and how hard you play, and it makes you...
Is there any delay at all with it, or no? Is it pretty instant?
It's pretty instant. Instant enough. No different than probably recording, with headphones on.
And use ambient mics to hear the audience, correct?
Yeah, so having the direct, the pickup right on your ears is kind of like, it can be a little much. But that's why I blend the microphone in there. And then the same thing goes for the room, Just having the band on the pickups and the microphones just on these in-ears, and your ears are sealed off, almost takes you out of the space. So yeah, we put a couple microphones on the front of the stage and kind of turn them up so you can hear the crowd or the room, and it's really a mental game sometimes too. Is just I don't know, it's a love-hate thing, because it's still better than wedges. Yeah. For me, anyways.
Oh yeah.
And for what we're doing, it's a battle of, does it take me away from being in the room, or I was just talking to Bela about this the other day, because he kind of likes that you can sort of focus in on the band and the music, and sort of like, who cares what's going on out there, and like, then you play really good, and all of a sudden the crowd goes wild, and you're like, oh shit, they're there,
I interviewed Bela probably a year and a half ago up at his place in Nashville.
Nice.
But I'd seen him play opening for Shakti. It's now 2 years ago or so, and he came out and he sat on the like a riser or something, just sat down, and he told me after he was really nervous that to do this because he's just playing solo, and he was amazing.
Oh yeah.
I think he had told me that he was listening through he could just hear the banjo out in the theater, basically through the mains. He didn't have a monitor there.
Yeah, sometimes I actually have a volume pedal on stage that is basically the volume knob for my pack, for my headphones. Sometimes I turn it all the way off, and I am just hearing through the speakers, behind the speakers here in the house. And I can actually play a little, not necessarily better because I can't hear the notes. And sometimes if I hit a wrong note,
You don't quite realize it then?
Yeah, but as far as how swift I can move around, like if I'm doing the intro for like a Freeborn Man or something, just this big. You know, and then you just kind of start singing or whatever. A lot of times when I do that, I'll just take my volume completely away, and I do it like that because I feel like I can. I don't know. I just can play lighter, more nimble, and more.
Because you actually want to hear it less, right? You want to kind of so you'll dig in a different way. Hey everybody, I'm Rick Beato.
I'm Pat Ryan.
Pat is one of my oldest friends. We've known each other for 39 years. He's in town visiting, so I thought, well, why don't we do this video together? And Pat is a huge Beatles fan, as I am. Today, we're going to count down the top 10 Beatles riffs ranked. Unlike the Zeppelin and the AC/DC one, where I talked about whether the riff is iconic, meaning from a big song, and whether it's fun to play, those are the two things that I use to judge them. We're going to add a different criteria here because the Beatles have so many songs that are great, that have great riffs or great parts and are fun to play, but what are we going to do, Pat?
Like a level of sophistication.
Whether the song is really breaking new ground with what it does, because the Beatles did that.
A lot of surprises.
A lot of surprises
in these.
Good times, good times.
Coming in at number 10 is a song off the Revolver record, which happens to be my favorite Beatles record. This was kind of the first psychedelic record. And this particular one has one of the trickiest riffs to play because it's actually a two-part harmony. Check it out. Coming in at number 9 is a song off the White Album. This one is actually trickier to play than it looks. I went back, I thought I knew how to play it right, and of course I played it all wrong. I'm probably still playing it. It's slightly wrong, but it's kind of awkward. It's a finger-picking song. Here it is. Song number 8 is based on a drawing by Julian Lennon. John wrote this after seeing this, and it's a real example of a psychedelic song. It's probably one of their most psychedelic songs, and it has a very unusual chord pattern. Here it is. Song number 7 is one of the most beautiful Beatles songs. It's got a great, great lyric, and the opening riff is just perfect. Song number 6 is one of my favorite riffs to play. As a matter of fact, when I did my Mixolydian video, I used this as an example and then had the video demonetized just by playing the riff. So this is probably going to happen with this one too. Check it out. Number 5, this tune is really one of the most sophisticated Beatles tunes, especially the harmony parts. It's off Abbey Road, and I think you know what it is. Song number 4 is probably the song that you would think would be the first thing when you're thinking of Beatles riffs. This particular tune was actually a double A side that was released in 1965, with the other A side, the other single was We Can Work It Out. Here it is.